Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Great, Marty. How are you doing?
Great, thank you very much. Welcome to Radio Nova in Dublin, Ireland. From one city by the bay to another, technically by the bay. At the time you were in San Francisco. How are you?
Yes, doing great. And I just want to tell you, I work at the Bend Radio Group, and the head of the operation there is Mike Flanagan.
Oh, okay. So fine old Irish connection. Fine old
There's
Irish
a connection. And when I was doing this interview that we'll talk about here with John Lennon, one of the people with me was from the label at the time, and he happens to be one of my closest friends, and that would be Bert Keane.
Another friend. God,
we
you
call him
can't
Keno.
get away from us. They can't get away from us at all. Well, you're very welcome to the airwaves here of Radio Nova in Ireland. We want to obviously talk about that big interview you did on that fateful day back in 1980. Can you first of all believe that it's been 35 years?
No. It's the whole day, guys. It was so surreal that looking back on it just seems like it happened just the other day. It's really true.
Does that mean you remember it then really well, Dave? Obviously, you've spent the last 35 years talking
about it. I remember it vividly.
Yeah.
Huh? I'm sorry about that. What?
No, I'm just saying, obviously, you've spent the last 35 years talking about that day and will continue to do so, I'm sure, because it's just momentous.
Well, what an honour, first of all, to be invited into John and Yoko's home in the Dakota building. This wasn't your random interview, in a record company office or anything like this. You were in their home. I mean, what was the feeling like that time you met John? I know you had some time with Yoko, first of all, but when John walked in the room, obviously the feeling was extremely positive.
That is one of those moments, Marty, that you remember, and I just see him coming through the doorway because I guess no one had told him that this interview had begun, and when he found out about it, maybe 15 minutes had passed, and the door opens, and he just jumped up with this leap, kind of like, hey, here I am. It was kind of one of those. And from that moment, and sitting down, it just felt like this was someone that I had known from high school, grammar school, like an old friend. I mean, that's really exactly what happened. And the interview just kept on going from there. And it just made it so comfortable.
John was an incredibly future-looking person, wasn't he? I mean, he was so positive about everything that was going on. He was so excited about the release that had just come out. Didn't want to really talk about the Beatles, mentioned Paul, but not so much. Beatles was done with, wasn't it?
Pretty much. I mean, the focus of this interview, which had been set up thanks to David Geffen, who gave me the honor of doing this. We had set this up months before. And without that connection, probably wouldn't have happened. But this was David Geffen's re-entry into the record business. He had several artists. He had Elton. He had Donna Summer, and John Lennon. And the focus on this interview really was Double Fantasy, and the fact that John had been out of the music side of things for 5 years. So he was really kind of getting back, as the song says, starting over. And he really felt like this was the beginning of all kinds of great new things happening creatively for him, which is one of the tragedies. The whole day, as it turned out, was such a great day, and it ended on such, a horrible ending. So.
He was busy that day, Dave. I didn't realise this was the day of that Annie Leibovitz photograph, the Rolling Stone cover of him in the nip, curled up on top of a fully clothed Yoko on the bed as well that day. No wonder he was late.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. You're right. No, this was the day that he started off in the morning. I believe that was, I don't know what time they had that shoot. Our interview was scheduled for about 1:00 in the afternoon. So we arrived with my crew. I had a producer, an engineer, my scriptwriter Lori, and my producer Ron Hummel, and we all got there around 12:30 or so and set up. And they had us in this little kitchen and an alcove set aside, and then from there, when it got time for the interview, we came into the room, and there was Yoko. We take our shoes off and sit down in this amazing room with a celestial painting on the ceiling, and we had a nice time with Yoko. She shared a few stories, and we have all of that captured as well. And then John entered. So, yeah, it was one of those days that It was tremendous, and we had about 3.5 hours together,
Wow.
and more than that. Since when we finished the interview, we drove off to drop them off at a recording studio. So,
And of course, it was after that, on the way home, at that spot outside the Dakota, that evil was lurking. And to this day, the description of what happened absolutely horrifies me.
that is correct. That's. And we had no idea, because I was on a plane back to San Francisco this event took place.
But when you saw the photos afterwards, when you heard the story, did this guy, Mark Chapman, ring a bell standing outside the
So
Dakota
chilling.
building on the west side of New York City, just on the west of Central Park there?
He didn't really ring a bell with me as much as my engineer and producer, Ron Hummel. We were loading up gear into our car that was taking us to the airport, and John had come outside, and he didn't have his ride there, so that's when we offered, hey, we're headed to the airport, we can drop you off, and sure, and he and Yoko jumped in, and we drove off. But while we were getting this gear inside, it's not like the gear today where you can do everything in the palm of your hand. This stuff was
Heavy, yeah.
But he was there. He was near you.
What was that?
So Mark David Chapman was standing near you then. He must have been.
Oh, he came over. He came over
No
and talked.
way.
He didn't talk to me, but he talked to Ron, our producer and engineer.
What did he say?
Ron remembers that vividly, and John signed an autographed this a copy of Double Fantasy.
There and then, in front of your engineer, he saw that happen. Jesus. And then a couple of hours later, the guys come back from the recording studio. John is carrying heaps of tapes, because he was tape crazy, wasn't he? He would carry cassettes all the time. And lo and behold, he steps out of the car at the entrance there to the Dakota building and is gunned down mercilessly. 4 or 5 shots straight through his body. A horrific event.
It was just one of those. You're looking back on it, if there was any way you could have predicted this, it was impossible. There weren't that many people, Marty, across the street. There were maybe, 3-4 people just mulling around, and he was one of those. It wasn't any big thing, but he did come over, and he spoke. He asked Ron if we had been doing an interview with John, and Ron is one of those people that keeps it close to the vest. He doesn't say much of anything. So if he mumbled a couple of things or didn't really answer the question and just kept on going, like, who is this guy?
Dave, there's some conspiracy theorists that think John Lennon predicted his own death. Did you get from that 3-hour-long chat in any way he was fearful of his life or thought these people hanging around might do him harm one day?
A total 180. It's about as far, anybody that has a conspiracy theory, hey, bless you, go ahead, keep the theory if you think that's what happened. But unless I had no clue at all, this is someone that could not have been more excited, thrilled. He said during our interview, he just turned 40 a couple of weeks before, which oddly enough, actually a couple of months. It was October. This is December, so in October he had just turned 40, which oddly enough, Sean, his son, who was 5 at the time, he's now 40, as of a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And but he was saying that I just turned 40. I believe this is just the start of the beginning of everything, beginning of my life. He was starting over again, and he was not thinking about anything like that, as far as I'm concerned.
Of course, in America, there was a right fallout from this. We heard about suicides after John's death. We heard about radio stations, not that it's in any way the same, but coming off the air for, to mark the occasion and things like that. It was massive news at the time.
35 years later.
I remember talking with a New York broadcaster called Carol Miller. You probably know her, Dave. And she lived around there at the time. She says she remembered the streets just all of a sudden you just backed up with people coming from nowhere and outpouring, looking to see what the heck had gone on.
It was, as I say, looking back at it, it doesn't seem like it's been that long, but at least for my personal situation, it was like 30. I think I went to sleep after like 36 hours.
Jeez.
I was up that long. We were putting together a radio special the special that we had that we thought we were going to do is going to be taking a good month and a half. Instead, we had to do it in 1 week.
Yeah, and it was flipped on its head as well.
Yes.
Dave, one last question before we let you go.
Sure.
If you'd known that day, 35 years ago, if you'd known you'd be the last to talk to John Lennon pretty much from the media, would you have asked him anything differently? Would you have done anything differently?
What a great question. After all these interviews, no one has ever asked that. I honestly can tell you, I think, no. I think we covered what I thought would be things that really expressed what John Lennon was all about. It gave him a chip, because we talked about so many different things. We covered so many topics. A lot related to music, a lot related to things that had nothing to do with music. Certainly his life as a house husband, his views on politics, and so many other things that were in that interview. I really can't say we would have done anything differently.
Well, that is good to know, and how special that you have that, and you always will have. I would have loved to have met John Lennon.
Me too.
We can only just say we wish he was here today, but obviously all we can do is mark his memory and never forget him.
And his music, he had just, he would have been 75, and his music is going to go on until the end of time, in
Dave,
my opinion.
If you were to pick one song off Double Fantasy, what would it be?
Oh, another. I would have to say it would be Starting Over, and I'll tell you why. That was the song that I first heard in David Geffen's office. I was working in L.A. at the time. I had not moved back to San Francisco. This was the summer before all of this, and went over to his office and sat down, and he said, "I want you to hear something," and played that song without telling me who it was. I had no clue. I hadn't heard anything. And I go, wow, this is like somebody kind of like trying to be Elvis.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And just love that song. So I think that's the one of all.
David, I'm really sorry. We've got to go back on the air here. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you.
All day.
Exactly right.
It really
exactly
has been.
right.
Thanks so much for taking the time.
Let me put you back on hold for 1 second. Clint just wants a quick word, okay?
Absolutely.
Thank
I'm going
you
to come to Dublin and track you guys down.
Oh,
Please
definitely
do. You've got the stories.
We'll
Let's
go
do
for
it.
Guinness.
Let's
right.
do that.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank